Hi, everybody. Again, we're going to start with a second presentation. And this time, after all the wise word Alberto Quero has been saying about the truth and the honest way of presenting graphics, I'm going to teach you how to lie with graphics. And I will develop this idea in a minute. But first, maybe let me share my screen. And I think you should be able to see this one. And I would like to thank, of course, the organizer of this conference for the help that they're providing me, including right now by being very reactive on any technical issue. So really great job. So before we start this, I want to ask you a question, and you see a poll right now, but maybe we need to see if everybody's back already. Yes, is everybody back? If you're back, of course, you say yes, or if not, well, you cannot answer no, but at least I will know if I can really start. Maybe let me recall you that this presentation will also be recorded. You can send questions to the chat box, sending the question to the organizers. And the presentation will last for about 90 minutes with many interactive polls, such as the one you just see right now on your screen. So I hope you see the answer. Me, I didn't say that I was back, but okay, I cannot probably. Yes, I think enough people are there that we can start now with all this presentation. But I will go very slowly on this. I will start with this first question. What do you see? And once again, you will have a poll, the first poll, asking you if you see something. Do you see any pattern here on this graphic? So you can answer yes, there is a clear pattern, or not really. This is, by the way, some X variable on the X axis and some Y variable on the Y axis, and you have a scatter plot with points. I didn't provide any context, just something, and some data are represented here. And the question is, do you see something? Do you see a pattern here? And the answer is that you do not really see something. So let's try with exactly the same type of question with some X variable and Y variable and dots plotted here. And I ask you once again, what do you see here? With the poll number 2, we will have exactly the same question, and we see if you see something here on this pattern. Sorry, on this scatter plot. So probably I'm not guessing, but seems to me that the poll answer may be a little bit different. And we're going to see why we use data visualization. And what is data visualization? We already have definition by Alberto Quero a few minutes ago in terms of providing information, but sometimes we also need to explore data. And oh yes, what a surprise. Here you see something. You see a clear pattern. And probably if we were in the same room, you would have told me correlation or some covariance of the variables or whatever. In fact, if I did this exercise here, and we may do as many other types of graphic we want. For example, in this graphic, you probably would have told me, oh yes, there is a U shape, I can see it. Or on this one, there are 2 groups. And in fact, if I present to you this sort of exercise, is to make you realize what you just did by looking at the graphic. What you just did by looking at the graphic is a sort of statistical test. I won't do many statistics and I won't go into theory right now, but what you just did, you were testing and using your eyes as a feature detector and as a general statistical test. This is the hypothesis proposed by Bucha, Wickham, and Cook in their paper. In fact, you were testing something like there is nothing, which is a sort of null hypothesis that, okay, there is nothing, versus there is something. And in the first case, you were not able to reject this, there is nothing. But clearly you answer that, oh yes, there is something. I see something in the second graph, and I see something here and here on the third and fourth graph. So in fact, what you do when you're looking at a graphic, you do a statistical test, trying to see whether there is nothing or if there is something striking in this data. And this is particularly important when you explore data. When you explore data set, you want to see what is in the data set. So if you're not doing the graphic properly, you will not be able to test whether there is something or there is nothing. Or you can fool yourself. You can lie to you. So hence this provocative question at the beginning of my talk, how to lie with graphic. This provocative title is there to make you think of what is visualization and how you can use it in order not to lie yourself. In fact, what we do when we look at a graphic, and this forward is trying to emphasize that, is we do some comparison. A statistical test is making comparison between one hypothesis versus another. It was written in a very broad sense in the previous slide. But we do some implicit comparison. For example, this curve tells you that the global fossil CO2 emission is growing over time. You have time here on the horizontal axis and the CO2 emission on the vertical axis. You see immediately that the curve is growing. So you implicitly compare the fact that there's nothing, it's flat, versus there is something, oh yes, it's increasing. So you do some implicit comparison. We do sometimes also explicit comparison in all the graphics we see. We compare surfaces, like this square on the left is bigger than this square on the right. You don't know how much bigger it is, by the way, but that's another topic we're going to cover later on. So we compare things explicitly, like surfaces, lines. We have here time and two different lines representing two different variables, which are global GDP. We're going to see this example later on, but we do compare lines, we compare lengths, bars, and we are pretty good at that. And we have seen tons of graphics like this in our lives and in our work. We can also compare colors. So let me explain you a little bit this graphic. This graphic is just the percentage of vote for one party, the SPD in Germany. And the darker the color, the higher the percentage receives this country. And this is a geographical map of the landers here in Germany. And yes, we immediately spot some sort of frontier here, right? While we are looking at an electoral result plotted with color that represent the percentage of votes for one party, we see a sort of physical frontier that is exactly the former frontier between the Western and Eastern Germany in the old terminology. So we can compare not color, but saturation of color. Here, the color it's all red. It's one hue, the hue red. But the saturation of color, we can compare that quite easily, and it provides information. But what if all of that was a lie? That is, are we sure what we see here is really the truth? Are we not lying to ourselves? Are really being able to produce these statistical tests and to perform them so that we are sure of what we see is really what is in the data? This is the whole purpose of this talk, is to highlight how we can be lying, including lying to ourselves, by designing visualization in such a way that they do not help us perform these statistical tests. In fact, I'm not the first one. There are lots of books that have done that. But this book is a bestseller. I think we have many editions of that. Like How to Lie with Maps. There is also How to Lie with Statistics. You have How Charts Lie, which Alberto mentioned, and it's really a great book to understand and to decode information. You have Statistics Gone Wrong. This book too, or Naked Statistics. All these books already discuss quite a lot about lies. But the question of visual lies is not new, but is really important, and we should address that. So I'm going to try to disentangle everything and to provide you some elements that will help you to know how to lie, so you will know how not to lie or how to decode when somebody is lying to. But first, a definition. A lie in this talk would be, by definition, is what you see on a graphic is not what you have in the data. I think it's pretty much the definition of what you have in life. Right? What you say is not what is real or whatever. Here, what you see on a graphic is not what you have in the data. And you will see many examples of that. In fact, as Alberto Quero mentioned, he said there are no rules in visualization. In fact, there are books with many rules. But this may be conflicting depending on the context. And I think he highlighted that very well in his talk, so I will not return to that. But since there are many conflicting rules on data viz, maybe we could, instead of going for rules, try to identify the visualize and how the context and how people were playing with the display, with the shape, with any of the visual elements that have been defined in visualization to people were playing with that, or consciously or unconsciously, to lie to themselves or to lie to others. So I want to decipher graphics and identify visualize. I want you to do that. By the way, this talk is more training than a talk, as you will see in a minute, because you will have your word to say. The outcome of this is that I will provide you with 10 rules for lying, so you could be testing this idea on your colleagues, on your friends, on your teachers if you're still at the university. And I think it is useful to know the other party rules or the other party tricks to survive in this world. And at least it is fun, and we deserve to have fun today as any day. So we start by maybe emphasizing the fact that visualize can be anywhere. For example, I don't know, but you probably love that kind of chips, potato chips. And you know that inside the bag, it's not full of potatoes, right? It's half empty. And in fact, there is even a website where you compare the content to the packaging. And you know that what you see is not what is real, right? You know it's a sort of lie. And you know also maybe why, because it's preserved the shape of the potato chips with this air inside. But there are some other lies that may be a little bit more disturbing. For example, this picture was taken during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. So people were not wearing masks at that time, but the social distancing was enforced and people were obliged to be in line with some distance. And we obviously see on this picture that is not true, right? These people, they are not observing social distancing, right? We see that on the picture. However, if we see the picture from a different angle, it's not true. This picture here, because of the focus, because it's maybe more interesting, could have a title and a context saying, oh, people are not following social distancing. Well, it's not the truth. And we're going to see that we live in a multidimensional world, and the truth live in a multidimensional world. And so we have to pay attention on what dimension or from where we are looking at this world. And everybody would tell me, oh yes, in pictures, we have to be careful. Yes, we have to be careful. We have to pay attention. Alberto Quero also say that we have to pay attention. We pay attention to pictures. We pay attention to video. We pay attention to potato chips. Why are we not paying attention to what is in the graphic? So what is in the graphic? There's nothing wrong with this graphic with this former president of the United States showing the COVID-19 testing in the US. I think it was in April 5. There's nothing wrong with this graphic, except that when you see that, what you see immediately, because your eyes are performing a visual statistical test, oh yes, it's increasing. But what are the tiny lines saying is that it's the cumulative. It's a cumulative curve. It means you add the testing every day. So this is the sum of this plus a new testing. This is very different because the reality may be something different. By the way, he's not the first one to do that. This is the cumulative iPhone sales. This is Tim Cook here. So people use that also in marketing. But to return to this graphic here, the cumulative, at first you say, oh, wow, what number of tests completed in the US is increasing a lot. The reality is this. It's stable because when you have a cumulative that has a linear trend, it means that every day you do exactly the same amount of testing. Imagine the impact on the population looking at this graphic and say, oh, it's not so much. I mean, here, of course, the scale should have been changed, right? But still, you can have visualized, that is what you see is not in what is in the data anyway. It's not new. This also former president was using that a long time ago to show something very insightful. Our bill, their bill, over time. It's not particularly misleading, probably. I mean, this bill and could be different, but we just have a big dollar sign saying, okay. So for most of the people, this picture means, oh, with the other party, well, there will be an increase in the tax. Your tax is written very clear. So visualization and graphics have been used in politics for quite a long time. I think it is more and more used to produce the effect Alberto was mentioning, to provoke some reaction, some question, and people may be misled by this type of graphic if it is not well designed. Here, it could be on purpose. So I will show you how to do that also on purpose. So I fully agree with Alberto Quero saying that there are no rules in visualization. There are some rules that we have to adapt to the context, to the data, and you have to revise what you do over time. It's an iterative process. But for lying, there are some rules. I mean, there are some rules that work all the time. And the rule number one will be to use devilish axes. So I will start with the third poll right now and ask you if you think that the data are increasing from A to E. Well, maybe it seems a silly question, right? It is increasing. I mean, I don't want to influence you, but I'm doing a little bit. We'll see what you say. Okay, time is over. And let's have the results. Yes, absolutely, it's winning. It's increasing. I agree with you. But now look at the numbers here. You have the impression that this bar actually is at least more than 2 times greater than this one, or taller than this one. So you have the impression that from A, the difference between A and E is really good, great. I mean, it's obvious this one is much taller than this one. So why this stupid question? Yes, it is increasing. But in fact, what you see here is not what is in the data. Because probably here you count stuff That's why you do bars. And the reality is that it is obviously in a data set that A has has lower value than E, but not as much as we have seen in the previous graph. Why that? Because we truncated the vertical axis, we truncated it to some value. What value? What does mean this value? We don't know. And the visual perception here, so the comparison, that is the statistical test we want to perform to explore the data set. The statistical test here is not valid because you have an impression that is not in the data. You have the impression that this is much greater than this, which is not true from the numbers, from the data. So using a truncated axis for bar chart is really one of the most powerful rules you can use if you want to show an increase or a decrease or to exaggerate some phenomena, not touching the numbers, of course, but just by the visual representation. You will tell me nobody does that. Yes, people do that, even in published paper. In this 2013 paper, you have something that is a little bit more subtle here. You have the estimated verbal analogy score. It's a score. It's a paper on education, and you have three types of groups, sorry, and you have the low, average, and high group of people with different estimated verbal score. And you see, oh yes, this group has lower than this group, and this group of person has a higher value than this one. But look at the scale. The variation is from 110 to 115. That's not much. That's definitely not what we see. This increase here doesn't exist as much as it is. It's only 1 or 2 points. It may be important to have a difference of 2 points. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that the way we visualize this makes this difference so important, and the comparison between the groups so important too, that it's really not fair, and the data should be presented in a fair way, in particular in a scientific way. There are some other rules that are a little bit more unusual. This is an example taken from a work from my student. I asked them if I could use their work for that. You have on the horizontal axis the number of steps that some learners perform on the MOOC, and here you have the percentage of the learners. So you have some attrition over time. I mean, you have many learners that only follow one step, and then a little bit more, follow 2 steps, etc., etc. There seems to be a bump here at 7 because 7 may be something important in this course, whatever. And you see here immediately there is a bump, right? There is a bump in this 10 step. So sorry, I will skip the poll for this question. But in fact, if you look more closely here to this, you see the bump at 10 is not a real bump. Look more carefully. The students grouped the answer from 10 to 19 and 20 to 29, etc., and 50 to 59. So look at the shape of the graphic. You say, okay, so as the number of steps increase, less and less students follow this. But this bump is completely an artifact. It's not true. It's a grouping. It's a change of scale here. This you can do that with Excel very easily. I mean, with any software, if you group the data, actually, you group the data and the software doesn't know that you're grouping the data. But with this labeling here, it's definitely made in Excel and it's definitely not good because what you see is not in the data. So that's a lie on the x-axis. By changing the scale of the axis and grouping things together, you have a sort of visual test that is biased. You are not seeing what is really in the data set. There are some common examples, and that's good that Alberto Quero mentioned the Earth's temperature, and here is a graphic that is on Wikipedia. I will escape from the plain presentation to zoom a little bit on that. Oops, not that much, but here I will zoom. Sorry. To highlight some elements here. So this is a graph of the temperature. So vertically, you have the temperature. And here, horizontally, you have time starting from the right here. We are here, and this is the past. And you see here, there is a legend, thousands of years before present, and here millions of years before present. So we know that the scale here and the scale there are different, right? So we have to pay attention to the fact that here are thousands of years, and here are millions of years. But here we see this vertical line here, but without thinking too much, we see that here we have thousands of years, 20,000 of years, and then here we go to 200,000 of years. So of course, the junction here is legitimate because this data point here is the same. We only change the scale. But the short variation we see here are not present here. And in the same way, when we arrive to 1,000 of year, which is a million of year, we change the scale to 1 million of year, to 2 million of years. So these variations here are just very small variations here. And here we go to 5, and then we change the scale again. So here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different scales. So of course, it's a long theory. But it may have been very good to highlight the fact that really we are changing the scale here so that we have a global picture that is maybe a little bit different. For example, when we have lines, we see and we interpret the trend of the line as some speed. But the speed here and the speed there, that and there, they have nothing to do because the horizontal scale is not the same. So we have to be very careful on playing with this scale. It's probably under the best intention that this graphic has been proposed and produced. But for the reader, he may interpret things in a very different way. This speed is very slow, and it has nothing to do with the speed we are experiencing now. So once again, look at the fine details and look at the scales. It will be okay. So I will try to return to the plain mode. Oops, I don't want to escape. Okay, so I'm stuck here. Okay, so just let me redo this. You will tell me, sorry about that. You will tell me that in real world, nobody does that, right? Nobody truncated the horizontal axis with bars. It's a trick that is known for years and decades. Yes, it is used actually. It is used by many, I'm sorry to say that, Alberto, but by many journalists or pretended journalists. That is people working at Fox, for example, where you have here the top text rate now and in January, whatever year. Here it's 35, you probably cannot read. And here it's 39. The difference between 35 and 39 is certainly not that big because you started at 34 on scale. So this example has led to a paper that I will present very briefly right now. So here are the data, exactly the same that you just have seen. The data may be right. I don't care about that. The fact is, when you present this is misleading. The truth is this one. This is honest. Okay, so for example, this is bad too. Presenting bars like this is bad. It's exactly the example we have seen with A, B, C, D, E. But what about this? This time we do not have a bar, but we have a line. Is it good or bad? And Alberto partially answered to that in the question. Say, oh, well, it depends on how important is this difference. In fact, when it becomes a little bit tricky is if you start to have rule saying that you should not truncate the axis, then you are wrong, because in the case of bar, it's obvious, the volumes and the lengths, then we know that it's representing normally counts or percentage or something that really represents something starting from 0 up to the value. With lines, we may use lines in a very different way. But what is interesting in this paper is that they say that there is no robust difference between these two graphics in terms of perception. Both type of graphics exaggerate the effect, whatever the type of graphic you see. So people have the impression here that this is much lower than this, and in the graphic, they have exactly the same impression. So what about global temperature, where we do not start at 0, as we already have said? We should do this tiny line here, because the 0 is here. So if we apply this rule like never truncated the y-axis, we are wrong. We are wrong in the sense that we would say that this is honest, and it is not. This is not honest for many reasons. One is that the 0 finite doesn't mean anything, and tiny variations have a meaning for people, for the world. So we should, even if this is considered as an exaggeration of the values here, we should be able to motivate the fact that we have chosen these scales for that and that reason. Without motivation, without explaining why you choose this scale, then you could play with axes and either provide a truthful information, a valid information, explaining people why this variation is important, or misleading people and saying, no, climate is not changing. Look at this graphic, and these are the numbers. So the rule here is that there is no real rule. I mean, even for bars, there are few exceptions when you can really truncate it. I think there are none. But for line, we have to be careful. It really depends on what it means for people. And once again, 0 finite doesn't mean anything. Nobody has never seen a 0 finite scale. So it's not a scale that we can handle. This has been discussed a lot, and I will not go further, but there are lots of people. You have references at the end of this talk if you're interested in that. But pay attention to the dates. It has been discussed by Cleveland long time ago, and by many other people, including this recent paper I showed you. So how not to be misleading? Pay attention to what you do. And if people do not explain why they choose this type of scale, there are two reasons for that. The first one is the software choose the scale for them, or they chose it on purpose to highlight something. And this something can be perfectly relevant, perfectly honest, or misleading. So this is a little bit subtle to spot, but you know that playing with scale is a huge trick to mislead people. Darrell Huff was playing with that with some funny graphics saying, oh, lying is easy. You can really change the shape of every line and show whatever you want. In fact, we can play with the rule, and I will do just an exercise with a line here. So here is a graphic with a line of 5 years and some values. I will not change the numbers, of course, but I will change just little bits of the graphic. Here, I started at 0 as here, but I stop at 10. And I put all the grid lines. Here, only grid lines for even numbers. See, you have the impression that it's cheaper. It is a little bit cheaper because we don't have this 12 lines here. The scale is reduced. But what about here? Of course, here you see, oh, well, it's increasing, but not so much. And what about this graphic again? And what about here? well, it is really increasing over years. It's really important. But sometimes you're not choosing to have a short x-axis. It's because, as Alberto said, in a poster, you just have this size, or in a paper, you just have one column to put your graphic. Then what you do, you squeeze the x-axis, whatever the visual impression is. Or you want to put that on top of your paper. But you do not want to have too much size, so too much space. So you squeeze the vertical axis, and then the impression is different. So you will tell me, well, these are silly examples. No, first of all, these are old examples. Playfair in 1786 had these graphics with a title saying the skyrocketing government expenses, because here you have expenses from the government, and here you have time. There are many drawbacks in the graphic, but it was in the very old days. And later on, he did another type of graphic, which is another type of shape, which you see here, the scale, for example, we don't know why the scale goes up to 20, or the highest value stop below 10. So it's not new that the people were playing with shapes, but we have the impression that maybe nobody used that. Look what we saw on the beginning of the coronavirus crisis in January. On some websites, taken from the John Hopkins, actually, you have a very short x-axis and a tall y-axis showing the number of total confirmed cases in January. And on the day after that, on John Hopkins, because they changed the layout, this was at the bottom. And so at the bottom, the curve looks very different than when it was on the left of the dashboard. So when you have dashboards, you design things. Oh, I will put this graphic there, this graphic there, this graphic over there. Well, you do not know in advance what sort of space, what shape you will need for your graphic, because it depends on the data. And really, these two types of graphics do not provide the same impression. Here, say, okay, well, okay, it's increasing, but that's not so much. Here, it's increasing. It's exponentially increasing. So we have to pay attention with this. There are some more subtle things, and I think we have a poll here, the poll number 5 for this question. So, to your opinion, which sample has the highest correlation? The one on the left or the one on the right? There are two different samples, but I want to know which one has the highest correlation. You know, we always talk about correlation somehow when you have two variables. It's a very old example, actually. Okay, so the answer is the sample on the left. Yes, it seems so because of subtle things that were spotted by Cleveland at that time, because the space around the cloud here makes the points closer together. While here, you see that really the frame of this graphic is adjusted to the minimum and maximum value very, very tightly. And so we have the impression that the correlation is higher here than there. Sorry, guys, but it's exactly the same correlation in the two samples. So we have to pay attention to the design, because the visual test we are performing, the comparison we are doing, or whatever decision or answer we're getting from this graphic is influenced by that, is influenced by the design. And this is what is shown in this paper by Cleveland et al. Actually, it's maybe interesting for you to know that you responded exactly the same as the people in Cleveland and paper, Cleveland and McGill paper in 1982. The people were thinking the highest correlation was on the left. So let's move to the third rule. We were playing with one axis, the vertical one or the horizontal one. What about double axis? So I've taken this example from Lisa Charlotte-Ross. It's a very famous example where she wants to emphasize the problem with double axis. In fact, if you want to fool yourself or to fool anybody else, use double axis. It's really magnificently easy. It's wonderful. You can play with that and find what or show whatever you want. So you can fool yourself, you can fool others. It's perfect. So here in this example, you have on the left scale the global GDP of the world, and on the right, and in red or pink here, you have the GDP of Germany over time. So what you want to do is to compare the evolution, it's line curve, or connected line curve here, of Germany and the world. So you want to compare the evolution of the GDP of Germany with the GDP of the world. Okay, so it seems that the graphic is made for that. But you compare a mouse and an elephant, and you want to put together in the same picture. So in fact, the unit here goes from 2.5 trillion to 4 trillion, and here from 40 trillion to 80 trillion. The first thing we must ask is, yes, so the axes are different, but they do not start even at the same level. In fact, if I was to show the full range for this axis and the full range for this axis, they are not aligned. So we are comparing, but one is below the other. Weird, but I mean, why not? Let's move on to this. In fact, if we realign the two, not changing the scale, but realigning, and we find, oh yeah, here there is a crossing. You know, when you lines cross, it means something for us. It means one is above the other. But here it's purely artificial. Nothing cross anything. You have a mouse and an elephant. You have 2 trillion and 40 trillion. No, they do not cross at all. So we have a graphic with lines that go together and cross, and nothing has a meaning. Really, what you see here is not what is in the data. How can it be? The data are there. I mean, it's just lines over time. Well, in fact, what Charlotte-Ross, show is that you can play with the left scale and the right scale. For example, if you enlarge the right scale, you have a flat line for the Germany GDP, while the other line is massively increasing. Or if you do the contrary here, you have the GDP of the world that is flat and the GDP of Germany that is increasing. So in fact, you can have any of these 6 graphics plus much more. You can show whatever you want. You can even align this to start almost at the same point in space. I will not say the same value because these are definitely not the same value. And you can even have, I like this one, to have them both steady. So this is not true. So what is the answer to that? Well, first of all, maybe you could do 2 graphs. One stating, okay, these are the GDP for the world, and this GDP for Germany, and these are different because the units are different, even though putting them together, and I mean, exactly on the same level here, you may have the tendency to compare horizontally. So you may still be thinking that this and this are at the same level. Or you can do something that's called indexes. You want to see the evolution. So if you want to see evolution and you have different values, you should provide the computation of the evolution. And to provide the evolution, there is something very simple. It's called indexes. You start both at 100 and you compare the evolution. Indexes have their drawbacks too, and people may not understand that so easily. But here you really compare the evolution over time, starting from this point, and this is clearly written here, when you start. And then you have an answer that is less misleading. That is, well, the GDP of Germany and the global GDP are not growing at the same rate, the rate being measured and plotted here since 2008. And we have a real answer to a problem that was really, really badly designed and led to probably false conclusion. Some people look at that, right, and take decision on that, and maybe say, why? Well, Germany was going very well. No, in fact, Germany was not going so well compared to the rest of the world. I mean, and with ups and downs. Whatever the conclusion are, people do visual tests using that. So they have the impression that they see something which is not in a data set, here in the evolution of the data over time. So you will tell me, yes, it's just an example. Also, once again, and maybe just for fun, a paper that I found in a very nice website named Calling Bullshit. You could click on the paper. Here, the bars are the deaths per 100,000 inhabitants, deaths from senile dementia. So this show an evolution over time. And here in red is the glyphosate application, and the scale for this red curve here is on the right. So the purpose here is to induce the reader into the idea that there is a link between the glyphosate and senile dementia, which may be true, I don't know, may be true. But in fact, look at the right scale. So how can a scale start at -1 for glyphosate application in thousands of tons? You applicate -8,000 of tons of glyphosate? Surprising. But look at the graphic, it matched perfectly. So when things match, you perform the test that, oh, the two match, there must be a link. It's published, right? So maybe the result is true, maybe there is a link, I don't know, but visually, what these people are doing are playing with the right scale. And in fact, in the same paper, you have the same type of things, this time with glyphosate versus steroid death. So here we start at -10, and they put also another graph, another line, which is the percentage of genetically engineered corn and soy plants grouped together. And you see, oh, wow, everything is aligned. You have Parkinson, you have diabetes, all that in the same paper. You have strokes. Here, the scale starts at -20 for the glyphosate application. So when I told you, I will teach you how to lie. I have nothing to teach you. People are already teaching you. Just by reading that, you have the impression that it's not working. Oh yes, hypertension also. I found also an example on a AER, American Economic Review, which is one of the top economic review, where you have a double scale here. You have the working time, this is age, in a company. You have the working time, and you have the assets on the other graphic with another scale. So I don't know whether these two and what is the message behind that, but when I see a crossing, I have the impression that there is something going there at the age of 8. I mean, 8 years after you enter into a firm. That means something. But in fact, since you choose the scale, you choose whatever it will cross. So this, I was very, very surprised that it was published recently in the AER. So we have to pay attention to what people use in terms of graphics to convey a message. And here, probably the message has been checked many times by referee, but the graphic has not, which is a problem. If you want to play and to have fun, you can go to this website. I have opened it for you, spurious correlation, where you could have whatever you have. I mean, this one is already very funny. You have the number of people who died by becoming entangled in their bed sheet. It's the black line on the horizontal, on the right axis. And on red, you have per capita cheese consumption. And when you see two curves matching so well with the correlation of 90.94 and R square also of 0.94, you say, oh, wow, the correlation. But you obviously see that nothing is true in this. It's just a joke. And you have many of these jokes in this website with Nicolas Cage appearing in a film that is correlated with the number of people who's drowned by falling into a pool, for example. So there may be some correlation. Nicolas Cage is jumping in a pool in a movie. It may have some influence in people who drown by falling in a pool, but I doubt so. Anyway, this website is fun and show you how to play with double scales here. There are some sort of other type of problems. Imagine that somebody show you a graphic. Here there is no annotation of the x or y axis. You look something like that, bars, and you say, okay, it seems that here you have horizontally the time, for example, you think that this is increasing a lot. And if it starts at 0, you say, yes, it's increasing a lot. But in fact, when you show that, the data, maybe you should look at the data source to see whether you are not looking at a short part of the data set. For example, what you saw is just this that has been cherry-picked in the middle of a much more longer theory, and the author is just showing you what he wants you to see. Example, climate change, for example, where people take this type of curve and say, hey, you see, it's decreasing, right? You can find this kind of graphic as global cooling. But in fact, what people spot is this tiny variation we observe from time to time in a long increasing trend and tendency. You have some local downside, which are perfectly logical. But by cherry picking that, people can try to make you think that there is no global warming. More subtle things, for example. I found this one very funny, especially today, and especially presenting that at the Bank of Portugal. This has been found on a pro-Brexit site. They say, okay, the pound rise 9% this year. The year was 1917. So remember the decision we're taking in 1960. And you see, oh yes, the trend is increasing. So the pound seems to be increasing related to the dollar. But the long theory, I was able to find exactly the same website where they have used it. So they just picked that period here, 2017. But look what has happened in 2016, right? And look at this, is when the vote happened. So cherry picking is quite common, and sometimes with serious journalists. Here, these are activists and people that really want to mislead people, but sometimes by selecting or not being very, very cautious in where we start and what we provide as a big picture, we may mislead people. So if you want to lie, once again, select your scope and say, oh yeah, we just select the part of the data that really interests me. And if the reader doesn't want to see the full source of the data or want to know why he has chosen this scope, why is it written that we only pick 2017? This may highlight the fact that there is a problem. Somebody is not honest about the rule, or maybe just didn't pay attention. Students do that. They do not pay attention. They take this year. And so I have an idea, and then it's false. Okay, so it's even worse in the long term. There is another rule that you probably know already. That is the do not use 3D or use 3D. So I found this one very interesting because it's about export of bananas, and I think it's the worst graphic I ever seen in my life. So forget about the bananas. And as Alberto Quero would have said, it's made on Excel, right? and 3D bar chart in Excel, there's a lot of obfuscation. Here you cannot see the value, you cannot compare the scale, you cannot read anything. This is really, really bad. We will all agree on that, but it seems to exist. This one looks more fancy, but you have a donut chart with monthly expenses in different categories: food, rent, phone, etc. With the values are encoded in a very weird way. I mean, obviously on the donut chart, the values are, the value of each sector. Here, it's also encoded with the color, and there is something with the 8 that means nothing, because look at clothes, it's the smallest slice, and it has the highest 8. So bad design can really make believe that the expenses in clothes was higher than the expenses in other kind of stuff. Or we don't understand why this encoding of the height of this donut has been made. It makes no sense at all. And once again, bad design can lead to bad decision or bad understanding what's going on. You will tell me nobody does that. This guy here is Steve Jobs. And this is a very famous example. Sorry for those of you who already have seen it. This is a pie chart. Actually, it's a 3D pie chart. The picture is bad, but you can see that there is here the 3D part of the pie chart. So I redo the pie chart. I a little bit exaggerated the stuff with the right numbers. By the way, Apple is a green, and it's at the bottom here. So you see the biggest share is green at that time, and Apple is there, right? And here is the third large part. When you look at this 3D graphic, so I've done it again, and if you compare, for example, this and that, you have the impression that this is greater. So how much is it greater? In fact, this represents on the screen 30 centimeters square, and this represents 20 centimeters square. So when producing some sort of pie chart like that, you enlarge the slices that are at the front of the graphic, and you decrease the value or the perception of the value of the pie that are at the bottom. So it is no doubt that it's by let's say a good by chance that Apple was in the front here, because his share was maybe not so big, and he wanted to convince that Apple has a big share in the market, and it worked. Now, probably not because of that, but so when you use 3D pie charts, you enlarge this, and really by a lot. And this is a lie. What you see is not what is in the data. Oh, by the way, people will tell you, it's not a lie, the numbers are written. Well, of course, but you will not remember the numbers, or even if you remember the numbers, you will remember the visual perception you had. Oh, Apple has a big share now. So even if the numbers are written, you can still define that as a lie. That is what you see. The visual test you're performing is not valid, is not performing the right way. So can I change that? Okay, whatever. There are some other funny things, such as, once again, Fox News with pie chart with 60%, 70%, 63%. That's just for fun. But once again, you can show whatever you want here. But the same, very, very recently, here it's not bad design, that people do not understand what means a pie chart. A pie chart is a percentage, and when you have worries, you can have several answers to the same, to several answers to worries. You can have the worry of getting it, or family getting in, or for the economy, so you can vote for the 3. And so if you compute a statistic badly, you end up with this sort of graphic with 68%, 62, and 48, which is really, really bad in terms of doing a pie. It's really not understanding statistics at all, or basic accountability at all on this channel. It's ABC for those of you want to know. Now, since we're talking about pie chart, I have a poll for you. So it's poll number 6. When you do pie charts, sometimes you want to compare also pie charts. So here we want to compare the pie A, B, C. So Joanna will send you right now the poll number 6, if it's ready. And I want you to see how difficult it is to compare the angles here. So the poll is coming. I don't see it, but yeah, you had the poll, but I cannot see it right now for whatever reason. Okay, so the question was, okay, so the question was, when is green greater than blue? If it's possible, if it is, or never. In fact, you will see here in this graphic, in this visualization, that comparing pie chart is even more difficult than just comparing the slice within a pie chart. And once again, it depends on the data. It depends on the distribution of the slice here on the 5 category. And I don't see the answer of the polls for whatever reason. Maybe I could change the layout or something like that. But my guess is that you are all wrong, because I've done this exercise quite a lot. Or maybe some of you have noticed that only in this situation here, the green is greater than the blue. But in fact, it would have been so easy to design another type of graphic. So yes, of course, it's important to know the share and that the total share does 100%. But if you really want to compare, and if the proportion of the slice are very, very equal here, around 20%, it's better to do a bar chart. Look, I ask a legitimate question, to use one of the word of one of the designer, of one of the thinker of data visualization, Jacques Bertin. Jacques Bertin was saying that you should be able to answer legitimate question when you look at a graphic. Legitimate question, comparison, visual test are almost the same notion. And here, a legitimate question is the one I ask you. You cannot answer. So it means the graphic is badly designed. While here, I ask exactly the same question, and you immediately see, oh, it's only here what that green is greater than blue. Immediately. So the visual test is very powerful there. It's very bad here. So when I told you this, say, oh, I've seen it. I've seen maps with lots of pie chart. This is in France here from, by the way, the National Statistical Institute. You have the same in the US. So people use and think that it will be useful, it will provide an information to put many different pie charts on the graphic here on the map. Well, the comparison is difficult with 3. What can we gain from this graphic? I mean, we have the states with normal, overweight, obese, and the size must be the size of the population, or whatever it is. So it's even worse when the size is different to compare. So there's no point in doing that. So you can write whatever message on top of that. The graphic will never answer or convince the people that what you have written is right or wrong. You will never have this right comparison, this fair comparison. Yeah. By the way, if you really want to do a pie chart, and you can do pie chart, I have nothing against pie chart. There are some. There is a book by Wong, The Do and Don'ts of Data Visualization, that is a practical guide saying, okay, if you want to do a pie chart, it depends on the data. That's why I put the graphic here. And you probably have the largest segment and the second largest, which are the more important elements in any share. What you are interested in is the largest segment. So you have to allow the comparison of the largest segment by aligning them vertically. So put the first one here, the second one. At least these two you will be able to compare easily. And then the third, fourth, and don't go over too much. By the way, software don't do that. they apply rules decided by somebody somewhere, but they don't do that. So once again, don't let the software choose how you will compare things. It's better to be data-driven than software-driven, or question-driven, as Alberto would say. Another poll for you now to highlight the point we were discussing very recently about the size. So we had pie charts, and there are different sizes. So now the question is, do you prefer one big or two smaller pizza? And I will try to have the information about the polls. This is the poll number 7. So that little music in my ear tells me that you have answered, but I cannot see the answer. So can anybody tell me the answer?
Yes, 16 for A, 63 for B. There was the answer.
So 16 for A, right? 60. So the people prefer two smaller pizza, right? Well, sorry for you, but this is bigger. One big pizza is larger in terms of the area than two small pizza. Well, probably within the people who answer two small pizzas is because you love the crunch. And you're right, there is more crunch in two small pizza than in one big, but not in terms of area. So this example is to show you that we use circles, we use visual variable that are very different, but we use dots and circles and things like that. But this we cannot really compare easily. We are not very good in that. And by the way, we use that all the time, especially on maps. Look at here, sorry, it's in French, but it's the percentage of the voter voting for right wing at the 19th election. And on this map, you have circles with the percentage for each right-wing party in each country. And it's not easy to compare, for example, France and Austria here. It's very difficult to compare. That's why people put numbers. And in fact, when you have the numbers here, you say, oh, this is 13, this is 26. This is a double on this. Hopefully we have the numbers, but maybe it would have been better not to have a map and to have the numbers represented not by a circle, but that's something we can really compare, something where we can really see it's the double in Austria than in France. And by the way, it's also, there's a phenomenon that when you have another circle in the middle, it's even more difficult. It's easier when things are closer together. It's a principle named Gilstadt. But I mean, the comparison is already not easy, and having something in the middle does not help. So if only the number provides the information and not the map nor the circle, why do we use this map? Why do we use this circle? That's a good question. Okay, so let's see if you are better with the next. Okay, so I need to. Okay, so maybe I will see the sondage right now. I have some information on that. Okay. Okay, so I will see some stuff now, I think. So the question, and this is the poll number 8, sorry. I will ask you to compare this square. So here is the percentage of people that were in jail in the US, and here is the percentage of Black people within the 100%, white people and Latinos. So, okay, you answer, and I will be able to use the dots here and see the sondage. Is it this? Uma pergunta. No, it's not that. Sorry. So I will not ask for the answer. I will ask for a second. So keep your answer written, or keep in mind your answer for the brown. And I will ask you now the yellow square, the small square, here, to see what's the value there. I don't know if the poll is finished. Yeah, it is finished by the. And here are the answers. So I obviously don't see the numbers. Now again, I've been trying. Yes.
Yes, I can tell you it's A36, B23, C24, D5. So 36 is the A is the largest number.
Yeah, and thank you, Paulo. And sorry, but you were wrong. And the fact that you all vote in for each proposition shows how diverse the perception of this square are. You know, you do not all vote for the same value, which already means that, well, if it is to represent one single number, why do we use a 2D visual variable such as a square? Why do we use that? It's not easy to compare, and you only need to compare 43, 37, and 16. You don't need square for that. You can do bars, or you can just put the numbers. And by the way, for those of you who are good in maths, it doesn't add up to 100. That's the beauty also of what is not written here. There is a percentage missing of no information. So once again, comparing size is not good. So why are we using all these comparisons that use area or size of visual element to compare if it's not easy? We have another poll here. For example, it's even with elements that we are very good in comparing, such as bars, if they are not aligned, and this is a poll number 10, if they are not aligned, it's not easy to see which one is taller. Okay, so I will ask Paolo maybe for the answer. People think that
sure, it's A57, so the biggest number, B7, and C30.
Okay, so yeah. In fact, you believe that none is, but real. I mean, I showed you the answer by just putting an empty square where I know that, I mean, you immediately spot that this square is a sort of unit. And now your bar is not a bar, but it's a sort of gauge, just that for your engine in the car, for the gas in your car, you immediately can compare B and A. You can see that B is much larger than A. I mean, much larger. It was difficult here, and it's easier there. And this type of visualization is not used so much, but okay. So I will try to minimize the screen and maximum the screen, but it's okay. So I can see now the poll, but I probably escaped from the sharing. Okay. So if we are not good in comparing bars when they are not aligned, why do we do this kind of stuff? Why do we use unaligned bars? Like in maps, once again, where you have so many bars to compare, so many unaligned stuff. Of course, there is a grid here. You can maybe compare the numbers. No, it's no sense. And this is an importance because here is once again a legitimate question in the sense that you do stack bars, and this is my rule number 8, and this is really the poll number 11. And the question is, have the banana cells increased over time? And this is once again a legitimate question. And I will answer with a website. No, legitimate question, but you have to compare bars that are not aligned. They are not aligned because they are stacked, and they are stacked over something that is not constant, the Apple cells, where you clearly see the trend of the Apple cells. Okay, so now I will see the answer. Well, people think that the banana cells have increased. Let's see if you're right. To see that, let's look at a website where you have the same version of the graphic, but this time you can align horizontally. So you were good, congratulations. The banana cells have increased. And you see, for aligning the bars helps you to have a better information. So of course you will tell me it's easier when you have interactive stuff, but if really you want to provide information about this type of cells, you have to be aware that you will only be able to see the first category and the total, but not the details. So if the details are not visible, why use tag bars? In this case, I think it's not pertinent. And unfortunately, we use tag bars quite often. And if you don't have interactivity, you can still do small multiples. Small multiple is something that is really important in data visualization, that is providing precise information on important details while keeping exactly the same frame, so you can really compare things. We will do an exercise with small multiple in a minute. This is a sort of stupid example. You can also stack answer yes or no to a question, which means absolutely nothing, but I found that in my previous university, so it was a good opportunity to say bye-bye, hello to my colleague. Another poll to show you something. So I know it's late, you may be tired, but this one, as the next one, are quite important. So I will let you sometimes to look at this graphic carefully. And now you will send the poll, number 12. What is the major cause of disability? Now you don't see the graphic, but you have seen it. So you can tell the color. Remember, there were lots of lines. What is the major cause of disability? So sorry, I didn't let you too much time to read the graphic, but you have many lines over time. And 2010 was the first line, the first year at the beginning. So you have a stack of lines over there. So yes, you don't really know because it's a difficult exercise here. So I will go quite fast. In fact, if I ask you a question about this graphic, in fact, when you look at the graphic after that, you don't remember a damn thing, because look at this graphic. Lots of messy lines, horizontal grid. So how can you compare? How can you visually know what is important, see what is important, decipher this graphic? And we do graphics like this all the time. I do graphics like that. You do probably graphics like that. But probably when you do that, you know what you want to see. Now I will propose you an alternative to that small multiple. Well, instead of doing a one big graphic, you do 4 different ones by graying the other lines and highlighting only one. So you can compare one variable to the other globally without having all this clutter here that is really annoying. And by showing a design where you have no grid, the numbers are written on top and the bottom, so you can remember the numbers. So just by simply choosing a right design, erasing what is not necessary, and using the small multiple, highlighting one and showing in gray the rest, it helps you. In French, we have this saying, le gris est ton ami, the gray is your friend. In visualization, gray helps highlighting any other thing. So you should use that, and keep in mind that when you look at the graphic, you may see things that people will not see at all. In fact, we're talking about line, but I will skip the poll 13 and go to the poll 14 right now. So you have time to read these 3 lines here. So once again, there is no X and Y, but it's an old paper. And in one of these three panels here, the difference between the vertical difference between the line is constant. Can you guess in which one? Is it in panel A, the first one, this one in the middle, or the one on the left? Sorry, I skipped one poll, so it may not be easy for Joanna. Okay, so the poll answer has disappeared again, but I try to.
So I can give you the results. It's Christophe, it's A8, yep. B21, C18. So B is the most voted.
Yeah. Sorry, it's this one. In fact, this is a problem with comparing vertically when you have nothing to help you. When you compare these things, you are not able to compare very well vertically. You compare following the trend of the curve here. And here you have this curve is going very abruptly. This one starts later, so hence the difference here. So the point is, we see lines all the time in our work. We compare lines. Sometimes we are interested in a comparison, in knowing exactly the difference. Well, if the question is about the difference, we should help the reader, and sometimes the reader is ourselves. We should help ourselves or the reader to visualize the difference. So compute the difference. And then if you want to see the trend and the difference, you can put the two graphics, one on top of the other. And then the difference is obvious immediately, while it was so difficult to spot the difference, to compute the difference in these graphics. So it's difficult to compare. You should ease the comparison by providing the right tool and the right visualization for your readers. And sometimes your reader is yourself. Once again, it's from a very old paper. Another tool, and then we go to the super rule, and I will be a little bit late, so we will have maybe, I will finish maybe in 10 minutes, if it's fine with everybody, and then we'll have some questions. This is a graphic, a visualization named radar plot. And the radar plot is a graphic probably you have seen where you put different variables on a circle and you put the value on each variable radially here, and you draw the line joining all the values. So imagine this is one individual, he has this value for variables B and C and D, etc. And then you have this score represented by this shape here, a sort of polygon. And so you can visualize many variables at the same time. This is really convenient. Now the question for you, and this is a poll, number 15. Here are the representation of the 4 music player and in acoustic guitar, drums, clavier, and bass. And so you have the number for all these musicians, and which one has the highest total score, to your opinion? So is it Tom, Colin, Johnny, or Ed? So you see that the shape are a little bit different, which is okay. So okay, so can I see the result? In fact, I don't care for the result right now. Sorry for making you play with that, because now I changed this, not the graphic. I just inverted the B and C. Look at what is going. I'm inverting the B and C, and by doing that, I changed not only the shape, but I changed also the surface. Wow, what a surprise. In Jan Holst that will present tomorrow in his website, you have a nice explanation why you should not, you have to be very careful when using radar plots. So in this graphic, you have the explanation. example, you have the explanation why. This is the total area for each player here with this order of the axis, A, B, C, D, and this is with A, C, B, D. The order of the area has changed. So when you use radar plot and you choose your order because it's ABCD and ABCD has no meaning, then the choice has an importance on how you will perceive the surface, how will be represented the surface. So it's very dangerous. And this type of radar plot are used, to compare the performance of camera, TV, or whatever. And you say, oh, this one has really a large area. Well, it may be a good indication, but it may not be. Maybe the scale with a different change of the order, you will have a different score and a different perception. So radar plots are very dangerous. So this was rule number 10. I told you that we have 10 rules, but I will finish with the super rule number 1. Use maps. I've showed you that how difficult it is to compare circles on a map to see. And this is really important because we all use maps, either as reader or as data provider, data visualization provider. And now I will ask for the poll 16 and ask you if you know the world. Is Greenland greater than Brazil? So your opinion on that? You see, Greenland is there, by the way, and Brazil is there. For those of you who don't know that. Okay, so Paolo will provide me with the result, but we will do an exercise here.
Actually, it's 48 for A, 44 for B.
Oh, so it's very close.
It's very
but
close.
Now, very close, yeah. So some people think that Greenland is bigger than Brazil, and in fact, it's because we have in mind this type of map. This map has been made with a projection that is called Mercator, and we all have that in mind. That yes, it's difficult to put something that is round or almost round on a flat surface, and so we have to distort, and probably we distort a little bit up north. But how much we distort? How much we distort the surfaces? In fact, the Mercator was not done for conserving the surface, but was done for conserving the angles for navigators. And if here on this application, on this website, the true size off, I will put the Greenland as if it was at the same latitude as Brazil. And in fact, Greenland is 4 times smaller than Brazil. It works well with Australia too, if you want. Because this part of the world is being really distorted by the projection we have and by maps, actually. So you could play with this, yeah, you have the answer here. So the first thing is that when we represent maps, we have to pay attention to what exactly we want to see. If we just want to see where the countries are, that's fine. If you want to see the angles, that's fine. If you want to see the surface, be careful. There is an exaggeration towards the north, and this is important in terms of how we perceive once again. So Greenland is 4 times smaller than Brazil. I was amazed to do the exercise because I knew the distortion, but I didn't know how big it was. So I will not play with this. And we're going to play a little bit with electoral map because last year in the US, this is the result of the 2016 election map per country. And last year, there was this impeachment procedure, and Lara Trump's tweet tried to impeach this. And this map is very impressive because this is the result, the election map result per counties in the US. And you see, wow, this is red. The country is red. The problem is land does not vote. People vote. There are some lands and some counties here, or units, geographical units here, that are very large with very few people. So when you provide a map like this, and you say, try to impeach this, you have a message that is, there's many people supporting the red, but in fact, you don't show the people or the result of the election for the people. You show the land, and the land doesn't vote. So that's misleading. In fact, the result of the election, sorry, this is for 2016 election, but you have all type of math for also last year election. You have the choice of representing this information in different ways. This is another way of representing. And here, once again, go to New York Times, Washington Post, Financial Times, and you will have maps that really mean something. Here, for example, when you represent circles, even if you don't see circles, you have the map per number of votes, for example. This is an information that is interesting. And you see the map is not red at all. It's half blue, half red, and there is overlapping of blue over the red, so we cannot really see. So what we can see is that there's a huge difference between this map and that map. It means the visual encoding we are using make the difference. Here, by the way, the representation is the county color is not the votes, but even for the votes, here you have many choices. For example, you can also say it's an election. So what counts is not so much the vote, but the number of representatives per state. I will not go too long on this, but here, this represents much more the election. You see there are more red than blue, and you see where are the red and where are the blue. But this really represents the outcome of the election. The outcome is that there are more representatives that are red, and so the president will be on the red party. That's it. You have the election, and you know exactly where. But I wanted to show you another way of representing the election in terms of votes that has been done by a cartoonist, very well-known named XKCD, where he has represented each little people, because when you are interested in votes, vote are people, and people can be represented by these people, blue, red, or even green. We didn't notice that there was another candidate here. It was other, neither Republican or Democrat. And here, first of all, you see where the people live, and the density of people is represented because each figure represents 250,000 votes. So this represents also the election. And here you don't see a majority of red or a majority of blue. You see a country that is even. And in fact, the result is this one in raw numbers, and you know that. I mean, the blue were a little bit in terms of votes, and the red in terms of the electoral college. So once again, the design of map is really important. And I will finish with an example taken from my colleagues, Françoise Bauken and Nicolas Lambert. And it's funny because Alberto Quero mentioned a map about a presentation of information about Syrian migrants. And it's exactly the same type of representation here. We have data about migrants or people exiled from Syria in European countries. And you can do a map, and when you do a map, you have many choices, many options. And here again, see Alberto Quero presentation. What option do we have? We can represent this information with circles, but what is the size for 100 or 1,000 migrants? Should it be very small, very large? Maybe I can enlarge the number. And also I can change the color and change the title. Here it's written refugee welcome. Here it's written the big invasion, and you change the color to have something that is a little bit less appealing. And you change these numbers. you have perfectly the right to adjust the size of these circles. This is a choice. You could also change the color, once again, to have something more aggressive. Red, like warning. You know, the red for many civilizations is the symbol of warning. Just by changing the color, the message you convey is very different. Once again, when you show that, you have to do that on purpose. And depending also on your audience, color do not have the same meaning in different civilizations. You can also enlarge, of course, there people will notice that you will play with that. But in fact, if you really want to see what it means in terms of refugee, you probably could do a count, taking into account the population of each country. If you want to see how many people arrive in your country, I think it's a flow, and the flow must be compared to the existing population. This is really important. The number per se means something, but how many people compared to the total population is very important. So when you look at the number relative to population, you have a different picture. You know which country hosts the most, and this is not the biggest squares, actually. The square was big, but, you know, not so much. In fact, when I show you this map, I also somehow lied to me and to you, because I designed the map so that, or this François Bauken and Nicolas Lambert designed the map in a frame showing only European countries. So somehow we decided that the scope was there. But Syria is not on the map, and we're talking about Syrian refugees. Syrian is there. The picture has been zoomed to focus on just European countries. And I think a more relevant picture would be to show the relative size of the number of migrants that arrive in Europe compared to the number of migrants that arrive in the neighborhood of Syria here. So there is a very nice work by these people showing what is a statistical map, and the outcome is be suspicious of maps, not of migrants, because maps can be very, delicate to handle. This is really complex design, and not anybody can really put numbers on top of map without doing mistakes. It's really complex. It's really difficult. So I will not go further than that. I have this example that I leave in a slide, just to want to show you some recent visualization of this type of maps for coronavirus. We have seen this from John Hopkins, color red, black, circles covering the entire country. These are choices. You have another type of representation, Washington Post, very different perception, right? And this is explained, and the choice of this has been made carefully. Another type of representation, New York Times, you have big circle, but with some transparency, you see also what's happening in other regions. You have other type of representation. You have that, for example, whatever. I will not go into this very funny example because it's getting late, although it's very famous. So I will do something very fast. It's an example where you take data. Here it's years, Olympic years, and here you have the winning time of the 100-meter Olympics for women and men. So in purple, women are, running a little bit slower than men, but there are some people say, hey, looking at these data, which by the way are not very good because there are missing points, and also it's only one value for one day in the life every 4 years, without wind, without whatever. But people may have this impression, say, hey, we may see something here. So maybe first I will change the scale. Why not? Because this tiny variation means something. Running 1/10 of a second faster is important. So perfect with that. But then I will do a regression line. Okay, so regression line, it seems I mean, one for men and one for women. And it seems that the step, I mean, this line seems to be more steep than this one. And so here comes the real super trick, is why don't we extrapolate this regression and decide when women will run faster than men in 2156, I mean, more than 1 century from here. And we say, oh, come on, nobody will never say that. I mean, we cannot extrapolate so far with so few data. And no, nobody will publish this, nobody. Yes, it is published. Sorry, it's published in a note in Nature in 2004. Exactly. I mean, I just took exactly the same data and do the regression myself. Okay, so extrapolating or doing regression lines that have nothing to do with, I mean, that are pure nonsense, and extrapolating this to try to highlight some elements in the future that is, I mean, so far away from that is really nonsense. In fact, they missed the point, this author, because the most interesting results would be that in that year, the woman will run this 100 meter with no time. Imagine that, even not a second. In 0 seconds, they will run the 100 meter. So of course, all of that is for fun. So I will conclude that telling you that sometimes we have to lie for a good reason. For example, subway maps are not maps. The real shape of the map in a subway for Berlin, for example, you see that because it's very convenient. It conveys the information you want. Where do you want to change? How many connections you have for going from point A to point B? But you know it's not a map. You know that the distance from here to here is not true, or from here to here. In real life, the distances could be much greater. But for a good reason. It's because it's practical here to have a subway network like that. It's very easy to understand and to use that for a purpose, that is transportation. Another type of graphic that is for helping you, it's ski season right now, even if the ski resorts are closed, unfortunately. This is not a map, this is not a picture, this is art, and it's very difficult to do, and actually no software can do that so far. It's only the skills of the people that can show you the east side, the west side, the south side, and sometimes the north side on the same type of representation. Once again, to help you connecting, understanding, locating you without being lost. So it's really an art because you have the impression it's a picture. It is definitely not. Things have been exaggerated, modified. It's really difficult to do that, but it's for a good reason. So I will pose and answer your question, and I will just finish by telling you that there will be much more people waiting for hearing comforting line than to hear unpleasant truth. And now I will go to the question and try to answer that. Okay, so Miguel, do you suggest we should use radar plots combined with color? No, I'm suggesting that you be very careful to not use radar plot in the way they are usually performed, that is, with the central part being colored and measuring some area, because we are not good in measuring area. We have seen that with the pizza and the square, but still, on bigger surface, bigger area, means for you, oh, it's better. In fact, what you can use radar plot is for detecting different shapes and say, oh, this one as a sticky point is very good in this dimension, while all the other ones, for example, do not have this spike, so they are not good in this dimension. So you can use radar plot, but not with the content highlighted or the content in plain. So another question, how do you see dynamic graphs? Oh, that's a very good question. As in a dashboard, as a way out of the bias caused by scales option made by the researcher journalist in some of the graph in the New York Times, this is possible. Okay, so there are many questions in the question. So first of all, the dashboard that are really well done, such as in New York Times or in, I mean, which are well designed. When you enlarge or zoom, everything has been planned and constructed so that you will have no distortion. That's one thing. But sometimes, yes, in dashboard, when you use Tableau, for example, or Power BI or D3 or whatever, you can play with axes. You can zoom in and zoom out. You can also say, oh, yeah, I want to shorten this. Maybe I will change the scale. So this is one of the problems of this type of representation. I mean, of the interaction with the graphic on the dashboard. I will explain maybe a little bit more clearly in that. Imagine that you have a graphic showing death for a region, and you have bars. Now you select just one region or two regions. If this region has a lower value, the scale will automatically go up to show you, the bars filling the space. And so the comparison with what is local and what is global will not be possible because you will have changed the graphic. And so this is a problem. And in dashboard, we had discussion with colleagues on that. How do you allow for a change in scale between the big picture and the zoom? If what you have seen previously is not at the same scale of what you see right now. This is a very good problem. And the answer is in what do you want to see? What do you want to allow the user to do? And in fact, if you look carefully on some very well-made dashboards, not everything is allowed. Because when everything is allowed, every type of comparison, including the comparison that are misleading, can happen. And this is dangerous. You can really have the impression that, oh, this has increased a lot. You can truncate things. I mean, you can do a lot of these things we have seen in this presentation. You can do a lot of this by yourself and fooling yourself just by playing. So sometimes too much playing can be good for finding the right way to visualize, but you should leave that to the people who have really seen and look at the data and explore the data. So what do I think of dynamic graph? I mean, I think it's a very powerful tool. It's really great for exploration. For example, it's wonderful. It takes 2 seconds to change something and to explore things. But we have to be very careful of what has changed from one visualization to another. I am sure that what I'm seeing now is really coherent with what I've seen before. So we have to be very careful on that. And if you look at the New York Times, because you cite the New York Times, they tell stories. The animation and the graphic, you have some elements you can change. You can select, for example, your country, or you can select maybe sometimes the scale between linear and log scale. We will have a discussion on that tomorrow with Chiara Sotis and her co-authors. You can change tiny things, but the story is written with annotation and words so that people are not confused, people are not lost. So we guide them to see, look, this is what I'm telling you. Look by yourself, this is what is happening here. So you have the visual, but you have the words. You have the perception, you have the statistical test, but you have the explanation, the context. All these elements that are really, really important. Okay, so 2 questions by Jose. When it comes to software for data viz, do you have some preference recommendation? Okay, so probably if I want to put a nail in a wall, I will use a hammer. But sometimes when I'm building my IKEA shelf, they provide the right tools for the right screws and the right construction. By that, I mean, there are some tools that are obviously the one you can handle very easily. And for that, it may surprise you. If you're okay with Excel, I'm okay with Excel. If you're okay with Power BI, I'm okay with Power BI. If the best tool is the one you master, the one that you know how to change the default, the one that allows you to do the graphic you want to do. This is the best tool. So for that, I will recommend one tool that you probably all have. And it's very cheap. It's a pen and a paper, if I can find a pen and a paper. Because before exploring or before saying, okay, yes, I want to represent that, draw yourself a picture. And then you use your tool, and then the data will speak, and they will provide a different answer because you do not have all the data in your pen and paper. You just say, oh, this should be increasing, and maybe I will compare this and that. And then when you see the real data, I say, oh, the comparison is tiny. Or maybe I should think of first computing the difference and plotting the difference, or maybe do something very different. This is not what I wanted to see. So there are some tools that are limited because you cannot do anything. There are some tools that help to reproduce former graphics. So for that, I will advise R or D3 or this kind of tools that are embedding code that you can reuse for other type of graphical, other type of data. But the best tools is the tools you master. But maybe I should add to that be curious about new tools. There are new tools coming out. There are online tools. Play with them. They probably will help you to say, oh, I can do this graphic. This graphic is telling me something. So you have to master your tools, but you have to be curious about other people's tools and what they do for that. I think tomorrow, when you will see Jan Holt's presentation, he will talk about the quantity of different graphics you have and how you can master them to really be able to convey the message you want to convey, or to find and identify patterns in the data you want to explore. Another question from Jose. Any recommendation for visualizing big data? Alors, this is a really good question because and there are no good answers for good question. By definition, for me, you cannot visualize big data because big data are flows in huge quantity and complex. So the three at the same time, wow, you have volume, velocity of flow, and variety. And some people add other V's. It's a nightmare. So the first thing is volume is a real problem. And most of the time, you're not interested in all the volume, all the individual elements. I say most of the time. Maybe if you are a telecom company, you're interested in outliers, the maximum or minimum or medium values. So you have to use statistics for that. So instead of visualizing big data, you will visualize summary statistics of big data in a dimension that is interesting for you. It's very rare that you can really visualize thousands of observation or millions of observation, whether it is, and if it's over time, like for telephone company or Twitter or whatever, it's very difficult. You need to aggregate at some point, and you need to use what is the best tool for handling data, statistics. You need to use statistics to reduce the volume of data to something that is meaningful. You're not interested in Mr. A or Mrs. B. You're interested in whether Mrs. E or Mrs. D is going to exceed the bandwidth or to have an accident or whatever information is important. So we are not visualizing big data. We are visualizing to answer questions, legitimate questions. So it starts with questions. You have big data. Okay, what in this big data can help me to understand this question? And then you can construct the visualization. So I think this is more or less what I would say on that. And there are some people that say, okay, visualizing that sort of data, that sort of data. And I'm not saying it's not important. What is important is what type of question do you want to address? What knowledge do you want to gain from this data set or this phenomena? It's not only the data set, by the way, it's the people, right? Or the machine that provide this data that you want really to know something, to understand something. We are focusing on data, but when you look at GDP of a country, there are people producing this GDP. Or, you know, when you see the coronavirus, there are people in hospitals. So this is why we are concerned. We look at data, but there are people. And maybe it's interesting to keep that in mind, that it's not only the data we want to visualize, or we want to infer from the data something that happens in real life. So I think that will be my answer. There could be some other question, but I do not see any, and I think we are it's quite a long afternoon for you and me. I have to recall you that tomorrow we start at 2 with a very interesting session that I will have the honor to chair. And in this session, you will have starting at 2 o'clock, Jan Ols will present from data to visualization. Really an amazing work has been done, and we'll tell him his job as a data scientist and how he's used all these tools. And you will probably discover lots of new graphics that you probably are not aware of. I mean, I'm just teasing there, but it will be a great presentation. After that, at 3, we will have Chiara Sotis from the London School of Economics presenting the scale of COVID-19 graph and how this affects understanding, attitude, and policy preferences. We mentioned, and Alberto Quero mentioned that also, the fact that people do not always understand the graphics, even when the graphics are providing a very rich information. And at 4 o'clock, we will have Christophe, a researcher from the Civil Aviation School, that will present data-driven storytelling and emerging technology in data presentation. That will be also amazing. So without further ado, I know it's late. My slide will be available online, of course. There are other things on the slide. There are references. There are some other elements you could scroll in. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm wishing you a very happy evening, and I will stay connected to see if there are some other questions to answer. So, Paolo, I think I will release the floor and say bye-bye to everybody. See you tomorrow for more data visualization.
Thank you, Christophe. I should do the clapping, but I don't want to sound, but it was an excellent presentation. We really enjoyed it.